The Russian army has reached the gates of Pokrovsk. This is not just an important tactical battle. This is not even just the next city in line after Avdiivka and Bakhmut and several of these others that were eventually taken by the Russian side. This one is far more important, and as we'll see here, has significant, even strategic ramifications, more so than any of these other cities that have been taken in the nearly 3 years of war here. And the ramifications of this seem to be understood by some Western leaders and seem not to be understood by others. And the catastrophic result of this, if everybody doesn't get on board pretty quick, is that a lot more Ukrainian people are going to unnecessarily die. Folks, the war is over. I've been telling you this for months, and now we are literally getting into the final stages. And I mean genuinely the final stages. This is about to be wrapped up. And it is one of the biggest tragedies of war. Whoever is the last person killed in a battle. It's just something that is anguishing, especially for those who survive. But nobody wants to be the last one to die. And of course, the question is, there doesn't need to be any more dying. So why not accede to extremely clear and painful reality? And I'm going to show you why I say it is so clear here today. First of all, I want to go to a couple of pieces from today's military summary talking about this action at Pokrovsk. And there's a couple of really important things I want to highlight. Here's one, first of all, it's talking about some of the defense belts that have been broken through.
The most important updates these days are coming from the Pokrovsk direction, where, according to information we have, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to capture several strategic defense positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. And the situation is very interesting. The Ukrainian sources reported that the Russian military took a large fortified area of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Pokrovsk area without a fight because the Ukrainian command did not send soldiers there. A key, finally good fortified area was built near Pokrovsk for several tens of millions of hryvnia, but they did not have time to send Ukrainian soldiers there due to certain inadequate management decision by the command Butусov, said the Ukrainian propagandist. So the Ukrainians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to take under control this fortified area that located between the settlement of Shevchenka and the settlement of Novotroitska, and the Russians also managed to break through and to take under control the next fortified area that is located right in front of the city of Pokrovsk itself.
Okay, so some of the most important things that he mentioned there is not merely that the Russians have broken through fortified areas in two separate sections of this. Listen, this is the most important section of the entire Eastern Front, the Pokrovsk. It's you've seen it on the news all the time. We've talked about it, have for months now, as Russia has methodically been moving forward. We've been telling you over and over that there's no reason to why that the Ukraine side can reverse this. It is irreversible, and we're seeing it literally play out day by day as this goes on. And now it's starting to pick up speed. And one of the key things that the military summary illuminated there is the fact that some of these areas were taken without a shot. Even though elaborate defenses had been built in part of this area, they didn't have the manpower to be able to even contest it. And you see, you've heard me so many times say that war is ultimately about men, not machines, not money. This is why you see that on the battlefield, physically, the Russian army has come into one of the most important areas of the entire front without having to fire a shot, because the Ukraine side doesn't have enough people. And so as a result, where those people are, they have fallen back to the next line of defense. And now then, as you can see in that last image there, it is literally right at the front, at the entrance of Pokrovsk. There are reports out this morning that Russian special forces and sabotage groups are already operating inside of Pokrovsk. Now, I'm going to tell you why that's even more significant than it may appear in the next segment here from the military summary.
The Russians are saying that this territory was captured completely without even a single shot from the Ukrainian side. And this is a very critical situation because this position is very important and very interesting from further offensive operations. And this is a perfect position for the Russians to create a foothold before further advancing in the north. And according to information we have, the Russians just managed to cut one of the railways, and now there are no problems for the Russians to continue advancing along another railway in the direction destruction of the settlements by the name of Novoukrayinovka and Chinchishine. If the Russians are able to take these territories under complete control, this is going to be a significant disaster for the armored forces of Ukraine, because they will lose strategical position with a significant number of dense network of the fortifications, and this is going to be a perfect foothold for the Russians to move further in the north. Basically, the Ukrainian defense belt would be cut in two, and without any possibilities for the Ukrainians to restore control over these territories.
And the reason why I wanted to really highlight that second clip there is because he kept mentioning the defense belts, and that the Ukraine side was being pushed further back into the Pokrovsk area. I'm going to show you on this other map why that is so important. We've been showing you a lot of this area for a while, especially this is the Pokrovsk area right here. A lot of where that discussion we just saw was happening about around this area here, Shevchenko and some of these rail lines. And that's the other important thing I wanted to point out here. These are rail lines that run up into here. And I'm going to tell you why that's important in just a second. But so here is the front part of the Pokrovsk area. And you see that after many months now, they're literally within a stone's throw, probably 3 kilometers away from the front of that. But I want you to notice something that's even more important. And these are some of the defense belts. He mentioned in there that this action could cut the defense belt in half. He's not just talking about the one in front of Pokrovsk, the one that runs the entire length of the Ukraine side here. You see that these all make multiple pieces of a defense belt. But here's what you need to pay attention to. What do you see behind this? Grass, open fields. You see a handful of more defensive positions here, and then almost nothing else back here. Once the Russians are able to break through here, then there's almost nothing that can slow them down in the directions further going up into the Dnieper River. So this could literally open up a gate if once the city of Pokrovsk itself falls. And then I also want to show you some of the reasons why that is also that it's so vulnerable. Because the Russians have the capacity to move troops up there in a hurry. So we've seen, so far all along the front line there's been battle groups that have been fighting or so. And so the question is, but how much do they have to exploit it here? Well, here's the thing. The Russians have the capacity to surge troops up there pretty rapidly. And I'm going to show you a couple of things. First of all, from the Institute for the Study of War, I want to show you some of the progress that has been made here. And you'll see on this map right here, this is a rail line here that's coming from, this is shortly after they took Avdiivka. This is on March 1st of this year. After the Russians took Avdiivka, they continue to move toward Pokrovsk. And I've told you why that's so important, because of all the rail lines that run in and out of here, all the road networks. There's like 7 of them. And the Russians continued to follow those rail lines forward. And I just showed you on the map where in this area down here, the Russians have cut this rail line right here, and they're literally right up to the front of that. Now, that's where they are right now. Let me show you where they were, if I can back out of that one. That was then. Here is a month ago. And you can see that they made far more development. All this area that was Avdiivka, this stuff went in, and you see again they continued to follow the rail lines. Let me show you why that is so important and why the Russians are actually following those rail lines. Because when you look at a different map, let me pull that one up if you please. You see that Russia has built these red lines right here are new rail lines that Russians have built. And this is the area where Pokrovsk is here. So I showed you the existing rail lines that were going up there. This gives Russia, and these are modern new ones. I mean, they literally had just been built in the last year or so, or completed. I think some of them as recently as June of this year, they were completed. Russia can now take troops, they can station them all along these routes, and then whenever they're ready, they can put them on rail cars and rail networks and get them up here quickly. So if there is a breakthrough right here, then they can move troops, mass them from nearly anywhere else from the existing rail lines up to this point in very fast, rapid succession. And because Ukraine has virtually no ability to interdict this traffic in the back, Russians can move up. On the other hand, that the Ukraine side, if they recognize that a penetration is about to occur and they start moving folks along theirs, Russia does have the capacity to interdict them on the rail networks as they come in. So it's a lot worse for the Ukraine side than it is for the Russian side. And that's the real problem in it. And then you may recall in our shows I've shown you earlier this week, the Wall Street Journal reported that in the last 3 months, there have been 6,000 drones missiles launched and airstrikes through FAB bombs, etc. 6,000 throughout the depth and width of the Ukrainian side of the line. So if the Ukraine starts massing troops, Russia has the capacity to knock them out. The Ukraine side doesn't. All of this tells you is that even tactically, even forget about any of the diplomacy, this is getting very dangerously close to an end state. The end game is approaching because once Russia makes a penetration there, they can flood through. And I've seen this happen many times in World War II history, for example, also happened in World War I history, and many others. Once a penetration of a line is broken through, probably the best example of that is 1940 France, when they put up initial really strong penetration to the German advance beginning in May 1940. But once and I think it was the 7th Panzer Division broke through near Sedan, and after some very, very fierce fighting, I've actually been to the battle scene there, and I've seen where that battle took place and how hard it was and read about a lot of those actions. But once they finally broke through, the Nazis did, then they started just driving into the rear of the combined French-British military and forces there. And it created a panic. And so in other areas where they actually had all the advantages of the defense, they got into a panic and started fleeing, because if the Russians flanked them and came in from behind, then they would be methodically destroyed. So in mass, they had to move out or lose their entire military. So things can go from this really slow pace to all of a sudden break through, and you have dramatic action. Now, I think that those realities are starting to make clear to people, because well, and you see there, that's not only is it making sense to other people in the West, it seems to be also falling in line on the military leader, that's General Sersky there, that we're going to have to make some unconventional decisions on the Pokrovsk axis. Now, he hasn't given any hints into what he means there, but of course, we've been seeing Zelensky more and more being willing to talk about a negotiated settlement and any kind of diplomacy, when before he was just categorical, nope, we're going to win, we're going to go all the way to the 1991 borders and all that mess. Well, now then it's starting to be clear, but here's an additional level of problem for the Ukrainian people. These things are clear right now. By all rights, Zelensky should, along with Sersky, and especially the opening made by President Trump with his election, say, the game is over. It doesn't matter how much more stuff. It doesn't matter if Biden's flooding the zone with $8 billion more of weapons and money and whatever. It's just not going to matter. It's clearly not going to matter when the first, whatever it was, $52 billion that we've already provided has not stopped that onslaught that I just showed you over time on that map. Made no difference whatsoever. So that one's not either. So we shouldn't be waiting another day. Ukraine should not be waiting another day. But for some reason, he is. So I want to show you, just even before I get into what Trump has said, let me show you a recent description of the fighting from Pokrovsk itself.
There are a lot of explosions. It's an artillery drill happening. Drones are flying, both kamikaze ones and those that drop explosives.
There's an offensive happening towards the town, and there's a lot of shelling. It puts our lives in danger. We stayed until the very last moment, but the front line isn't 6 kilometers as they officially claim. It's not further than 3.
There's no running water, and these people brave the freezing cold and the threat of being bombed to collect it.
They're shelling every day. I hear at least 20 explosions a day. People are worried about it. Over the last 2 weeks, the situation has gotten significantly worse, with more powerful explosions.
Now, I've shown you a couple of times, and you've probably seen it on other newscasts, an excerpt of Trump's Meet the Press experience last Sunday, where he was talking about he's going to start withholding funds, that he thinks a negotiated settlement, he wants an immediate ceasefire, etc. That's been played a lot. But some of the other things he said in that same interview really tell into what you just saw there, because he is seeing the human casualties, the military casualties, and the civilians. They are actually having an impact on him. Trump apparently is seeing the ground truth and recognizing it for what it is. So here's that part of the interview that you probably haven't seen.
Let me tell you what I have talked about. Let me
Okay.
tell you. There are people being killed in that war at levels that nobody's ever seen before. You have to go back to the Second World War, and even that, if you take a look at, and you know what it is? It's the soldiers largely. The cities have been emptied out and demolished. The country has been demolished. You know what's happening?
Yeah.
The only thing that stops a bullet, you know what it is a body, a human body. And the people that are being killed, hundreds of thousands on both sides. Russia's lost probably 500,000.
Devastating.
Ukraine's lost higher than they say, probably 400,000. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of bodies laying all over fields. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and it should have never been allowed to happen.
And that then is the reason why Trump is saying it's time for an immediate ceasefire. He's not saying, hey, let me come in and let me make an assessment of it and see what we think, and maybe this can go on. We'll listen to Zelensky, et cetera. You saw that he actually met with Zelensky and Macron just a couple of days ago. So he clearly told Zelensky it's the end game. We are going to slow down our delivery of information, weapons. We are going to seek an immediate ceasefire. I am talking to Putin, he said earlier in that same interview right there. Now, on the one hand, Zelensky seems to get it. But then does he really? Because he said in a recent interview that he understands it's time to reach a negotiated settlement. There, if you can throw that other headline up there at this point, that's what he said. He said, I'm ready to make a deal. So then the question has to be, okay, if you're ready to make a deal, then why are you going to wait until Trump gets into office? Make the deal right now while all this destruction that Trump's talking about is still going on. But you see in that call out there to the right that he's saying, hey, well, you can't just simply end it with a piece of paper and a few signatures, and you can't turn a blind eye to the occupation is not an option. Okay, that's aspirational. That's, gee, if the world could be like I want, then that's the way I would go. But here's the thing that Zelensky has somehow got to get. That you said with your own mouth, it's over. There's going to be a deal. I'm ready to make a deal, but I want it on my terms. Listen, every single day that he persists in this kind of stuff means more of his countrymen die. And it will not, let me re-emphasize this, will not change the outcome. If he calls Trump in 10 minutes from now, maybe he's watching this episode and he recognizes, oh, shoot, okay, let me call him up right now and start the negotiations right now, or calls Biden, whatever, and says, yep, we're ready to go. Let's end the war. Let's call a ceasefire today. That's the end result is not going to be changed. Whereas if he refuses to do that and goes until January 20th to start taking any action. And here's what he said in an interview just a couple of days ago about his level of willingness.
With this new president of the United States, we are siding together. He does want to end this war. And we Ukrainians really want to end that war as well.
Okay, if you want to end it, if you know for a fact that Trump is going to end the support, then why do you want to continue waiting? Because I get it. You would like an outcome that's favorable to you. That's not going to happen. There is zero chance that's going to happen. And now one of the most stalwart, in case he needed any help, one of his most stalwart supporters has been the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, who's now saying in public, you know what? I think negotiations are going to start in the winter. Well, winter is like about a week or so officially away. So that means something really, really near term is going to have some of his not so much friendly people. You have Fico from Slovakia, who's saying, listen, I'm just going to call it like it is. Now, Fico here is saying that what you and I talk about on this channel all the time. It's over. And here's what over is going to look like. You're going to lose probably a third of your territory, and there will be no NATO. Now, that carries power that my words don't carry, because he would have to vote for NATO, for Ukraine ever to come into NATO. As the leader of Slovakia, a NATO member, it has to be unanimous. It can't be 99%. It's got to be unanimous. And he is very clearly saying there will be no NATO in Ukraine, which I've been trying to tell everyone who would listen since before this war started. Ukraine will never come into NATO, because NATO is not, well, I was going to say they're not stupid. Kind of they are in some ways, but they're not suicidal. And they're not going to get into a war that they cannot win and should never fight just because of Ukraine. Actually, Gary, I told you we weren't going to play this one earlier, but if you still have that second clip of him, Zelensky claims on the one hand, he recognizes that NATO's not coming in.
United States and other partners cannot take Ukraine into NATO while we are having war. Ukraine understands that, and we do not want to involve military personnel of other countries into this war. Some say Ukraine wants to involve NATO into the war. That is not true. That's why we are looking for that invitation. And we understand that while we are having war, we are not being admitted as NATO membership.
Okay, that's 2 days ago, folks. 2 days ago. So again, with his mouth, he says that he recognizes what I've been saying forever, what is manifestly evident on the battlefield. The war cannot be won. I am going to lose some territory, and we're not going to be in NATO. Now, you can say, well, we won't be in NATO now, but then later on. But the other part of this negotiation is you have to look at the Russian side. You have to come up with some sort of plausible reason why Putin would ever say, sure, we'll put that question off for 10 years, and then we'll discuss it. When that is the critical point, the central point that he went to war in the first place was because of NATO and Ukraine. It is beyond question, as crystal clear as it can be, reinforced just a couple of days ago by Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, emphasized on June 14th this past summer by Putin himself. There will be no NATO. It will be non-aligned, non-NATO entity that's negotiated on the other side. It's not negotiable from the Russian perspective. And as I just showed you on the battlefield, Russia has all the cards. They can dictate the terms. They don't have to negotiate anywhere. They don't. They can just, if you're not willing to reach that negotiated settlement, they'll simply say, okay, we'll just keep going then. They won't do anything different than they've been doing right now. And they'll say, yeah, they see that same map that I showed you about the defensive lines on the other side of Pokrovsk and the large number of Russian formations that are behind the ones that are at the front line right now. All he'll do is tell the negotiators, listen, if you don't accede to what exists in the realities on the ground, then we'll simply keep going. And that's where Zelensky seems to be missing his golden opportunity to save some of his people now. Don't, out of pride or arrogance or just wishful thinking, think that by waiting for some reason until January 20th to start the negotiating process, how many more men have to die in between then? And somebody else that's not lost on is Viktor Orban of Hungary. And he tweeted out that, listen, I have a plan here that I tried to. It's one of the last things he's doing is rotating presidency of the European Union. He said in a tweet, this is yesterday, we made efforts for peace. We proposed a Christmas ceasefire and a large-scale prisoner exchange. It's sad that President Zelensky clearly rejected and ruled this out today. We did what we could. I mean, Orban, since he took over the rotating EU presidency, you may recall, he went to Moscow and one of the first one that broke through in the West and said, I'm willing to talk to anybody if it can end the war. And then he went to Xi Jinping, and then he went to Zelensky himself. He literally talked to everyone, begging them to make a difference here. That was months ago. How many Ukraine soldiers died yesterday in front of Pokrovsk? How many died elsewhere in the Kupiansk area or in the Kursk area? All of those things could have been avoided. So those men are now dead. It's irretrievable. You can never get those deaths back. But how many people are on the line right now as I'm making this video that are alive, that have no need to die? Why should one more Ukrainian man die for this cause that is already past tense lost? And unfortunately, that's where we are right now, is that the Ukraine leader seems to be holding out until January 20th for irrational reasons. There is nothing to gain. Russia's negotiating position will be stronger on January 20th than it is right now. And as we're also sitting here talking, there has been an inexplicable permission given by the Biden administration for an ATACMS mission apparently a couple of days ago. And yesterday, the Russians acknowledged that it was an ATACMS missile and that they are going to respond. So something else is coming. That's where the conditions are right now. But apparently, the airspace over the Cosmodrome where the last Oreshnik was fired has been closed until the 13th, which is, I guess, tomorrow. So something big could be coming overnight tonight. And Russia has been, like I said, they've been firing about 2,000 missiles, drones, and air attacks per month in recent days. And there's every reason to think that that's going to continue on through this month. So even aside from that big strike, something else may be coming. And they may even change the target list, because one of the things you may recall when permission was originally given, Vladimir Putin said that we will respond in a tit for tat way, in a mirror operation. If you hit our airfield, we'll hit your airfield. Well, that's what was attacked, an airfield, a Russian airfield. I think it was in the Bryansk area. So now one would imagine that there's going to be a Russian response, and they said that categorically there will be a response, and there's no reason for them to be bluster on that. They have all the cards, and they can do it, and the Ukraine side can do virtually nothing to stop it. So the situation as it is right now, again, if Zelensky's watching this, dude, pick the phone up right now. Don't even wait for the video to end. Call Vladimir Putin, call Joe Biden, whoever you need to. Let's get this off the table before the next hammer blow falls, because waiting until January 20th will make your conditions worse, will mean you'll end up with less territory, and more of your countrymen will unnecessarily die. Don't do that. That is so anguishing me. That's one of the things it's hard for me to make these videos and hard for me to cover this, because of the absolute waste of Ukrainian lives. And Zelensky deserves a lot of blame and a lot of condemnation for what he's doing here, but so do many in the West. So does the American president, the British prime minister, the French president, who just keeps on shoveling more money, and the Germans as well. They continue shoveling more and more money in. There is no path for any of that to make a difference. All it's going to do is to allow them to die in more rapid fashion. I don't know if they recognize that. They're not helping Zelensky negotiate better, because that day is gone. It's over. But they are perversely helping Moscow kill more Ukrainians. That is the ugly, core, horrible truth, is that by providing more arms and ammunition at this late hour, all it does is allow them to keep fighting and dying, and it will not change the end, folks. That's where we are right here on the 12th of December, 2024. As we get ready to close out this year and close in on the full 3-year anniversary of this horrific war. God only hopes that it will be over by then, that once Trump comes in, he'll do exactly what he said he would do, and have a ceasefire so that we can have the negotiations can actually begin. We'll see how that works out, because I like I've said also, Trump's negotiating hand is he's got a weaker hand than anything he had when he was in office, and Putin doesn't have to listen, but we'll have to wait and see how that works out. Maybe something can happen, because Putin may be willing to be, and say, hey, listen, we've already won this. Let's stop the killing. Maybe he's going to have the same idea as Trump does. Let's hope so. I'd love to see that. But we'll keep watching for it, and we'll keep tracking on this that happens. If there are any new Oreshnik missile strikes, if there's anything new missile-wise that happens that changes anything on the battlefield, you can be sure we'll be covering that for you. So be sure and check back here as soon as you hear some news. We'll give you the no kidding, here's what's happening. In the meantime, also just a reminder for all those who are new here, be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't already, and also to make you aware that we are also a podcasting organization here. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, all 4 of the words, and you will find us waiting there. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.